we've seen, interestingly, several phenomena. First of all, this year, the number of military involved in the joint military exercise between U.S. and the Philippines have increased dramatically. Secondly, we have also seen that the U.S. is going to station once again its military personnel inside the Philippines in 2 decades, coming back again. How should we interpret this, particularly when you have this joint military exercise near the Huangyan Island?
Well, I'm not in the government, but I think it's unmistakable that this is a response to the increased Chinese activity in the South China Sea. There's a broad perception that China's landfill operations in the Spratlys and Paracel Islands have led people to think that China is trying to militarize the South China Sea, and that a strong message needed to be sent in return. Hence the very substantial increase in the size of the Balikatan exercise. And less noted are the efforts to help the Philippines upgrade their own facilities in that area.
Very strong message. Well, what kind of strong message do you think Beijing take it as, Mr. Yang?
Well, first of all, regarding to these exercises, I think from Beijing's point of view, the nature of the exercises, which used to be the routine one, has been changed. Say, the very obvious goal at China, aiming at China.
Why would you say so?
Well, the size of the exercise is doubled, and the location is very close to the disputed island, Huangyan Island. And U.S. want to send the so-called strong message. But I think if U.S. is responsible, is concerned about the peace and stability, they should encourage the Philippines to come to the negotiation table. Whatever the Philippines has to say should put on the table, rather than put your money, your energies, your resources on the military exercise field.
All right, Mr. Paul, before I go to our Filipino guest, let me come back to you again. Mr. Yang is arguing U.S. is not doing it responsibly. What do you think?
I think the U.S. has no choice but to take this action in the current circumstance. I would disagree with my good friend Mr. Yang in a small matter, which is the Philippines has gone to the table, but not to China's table. It's gone to the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea to get an international adjudication of the claims that China has made on territory that the Philippines also claims. And so they are taking a peaceful method. I think what you're seeing in the Chinese sand operations on these little shoals and atolls in the South China Sea is an effort to strengthen China's claims, and what you're seeing on the Philippine side is an effort to strengthen Philippine claims, all with a view to joining together toward a solution or a resolution when the International Tribunal reports back, perhaps as early as December.
I see. Mr. Reyes, though, in the Philippines, let me ask you this. The Philippines, according to Mr. Paul, is going to the International Criminal Court on the one hand, and also going to the U.S. arms as well, not necessarily at all going to the negotiation table with China, which is also involving a dispute between China and the Philippines directly. Do you think that is a smart approach? What do you make of the current military exercise?
Well, right now, let me state for the record that we are opposed to China's claims and incursions in what we believe to be the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. We are also opposed to the idea that our salvation, that our only hope of countering China is to hang on to Uncle Sam and allow the renewed presence of bases and more U.S. troops in our territory. So we prefer to pursue our claims by the peaceful route. That's why we support the filing before the IT laws. However, right now, the complication is that the U.S. is trying to assert itself, trying to justify the establishment of its bases and more troops in our country under the pretext of protecting us against China, which we think is not really going to happen.
All right, this is a very interesting conversation. We are having different interests are already lined up over there. Mr. Paul, your response to our Filipino guest. U.S. is taking advantage of the China-Filipino conflict in terms of boosting its own presence in this part of the world.
I'm hearing a debate from the late 1980s, early 1990s, not one relevant to today in what Mr. Reyes has to say. The United States is not seeking to base troops in the Philippines. The Enhanced Defense Cooperation Act, which was signed agreement which was signed last year, explicitly does not allow the stationing or basing of American forces in the Philippines. But it does allow increased operations to help the Philippines in defending its own territory.
Well, Mr. Reyes, it's only fair that I let you speak now.
Yeah. I think they have to really explain how these agreements are going to help the Philippines concretely, because we've been having military exercises. We've had 31 Balikatan exercises over the last 3 decades. This hasn't really modernized our armed forces. We've had U.S. bases for nearly half a century. This has not modernized our armed forces. So what exactly are we getting? What are the benefits, and how is this helping develop our armed forces? We don't see that, and we don't see it in the future.
We probably need to ask the chief of the Pentagon to explain to you later in details on certain occasions. But for now, let me come back to you, Mr. Yang. Some argue China should not complain about the military exercise jointly going on between the United States and the Philippines, because after all, China is also trying to improve its military ties with the United States. We see increasing military exchanges between these two countries, personnel meetings, even parties on the boat. So when they're having their own joint military exercise, which involved China, the United States invited China after all. So should China be that extremely nervous and cautious about exactly what's going on right now between the Philippines and the U.S.?
Well, in my observation, no concern at all, because number one,
you're not concerned.
No.
Okay, explain.
Okay, number one, the joint bilateral, trilateral, multilateral exercises has been quite common all over the world. Even China has such kind of exercises. And then number two, even the U.S. and the Philippines has the intention to show muscles to China. I don't think China will care about that. As long as no war on China, China will still focusing on our own economic development. Of course, if the Filipino want to send a signal backed by the United States, I don't think China will care such a the so-called deterring signals, because China deterrence never worked on China in the history the past decades, and China will go through the two tracks. Track one, keep opening the door for negotiation. My friend Mr. Paul pointed out they go to the international lawsuit.
Criminal court.
However, everyone knows, the Philippines knows, the solution lies in directly negotiations. You can find very few cases decided or solved by the third party, especially for this very complicated case. The so-called peaceful way go to the third party is not a constructive way.
Right.
And also, we have to make a preparation. If U.S. back some Philippines provocations, we have to make ready. So in short, no matter how big size of the joint drill is, how close to China's Hualien Island, we will know nervous, but we will strengthen our two hands.
All right, let me go back to you, Mr. Reyes. You heard very clearly from Mr. Yang here in Beijing. What do you make of the suggestion that territorial disputes has to be handled, after all, eventually, by negotiations on the parties involved?
Yep.
Do the Filipino side, do you think, understand this ultimate solution which has been tested through history anyway? And also, do you think there is a timetable, given the internal politics we also understand going on in your country, that this could ever happen, Mr. Reyes?
Well, let me first say that the Philippines is entitled, it has the right to seek whatever peaceful diplomatic solution it can to resolve this dispute with the territorial waters. So it's up to the Philippine government to seek clarification and seek a ruling from the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. It's up to the Philippine government. It's well within our rights to seek multilateral support for our claims.
But will that
and,
solve the problem,
yes,
you
of course,
think?
the bilateral option is always there. Well, right now, it really depends on how the two parties would come to terms. Now, for example,
see.
China refuses to recognize our claims before the ITLOS. So it prefers to have a bilateral negotiation, which we feel it might not be advantageous for our claims.
All right.
So China also has to respect the options being taken by the Philippine government in this case, because that is what we feel is in the best interest of our country.
Okay, Mr. Yang, respond briefly before I go to Mr. Paul.
Okay, if we respect to Filipinos' constitution before late 1990s, if we respect to the two U.S. Spain treaties and the U.S. British treaties, I would say, and you would say, and the Filipinos would say, Huangyan Island is out of Filipinos' territory scope. So now, in short, I think Filipino is